Hi guys, how are you doing? So in this project we are going to be building this landing page. But first of all, shout out to this guy, Metaverse web page. I found his design on Dribble. I liked it, so I decided to use it for this tutorial. All I did is looking at the design and recreate it using HTML and CSS styling. We are going to be using some grid system and a little bit of JavaScript. So this is the landing page. Firstly, we have the nav bar and the hero section. At the top left, we have the logo, and at the top right, we have the menu. We also have some content here, the badge, the title, the buttons, and so on. We are gonna be using the grid here and also display flex and justify. We're gonna see that later. As you can see, whenever I hover on the menu elements, there is some effect happening, except for the search icon and contact button. Below the hero, we have this, which is meant to be for the company features. We have some text aligning, padding as well as the grid. Here is the rest of the project, about us, newsletter, and footer. For newsletter, we're gonna have an image in the background, some text in the middle, and the input. We also gonna make this landing page responsive. Right click, inspect, and there you go. As you can see, whenever I change the size of the page, all the elements inside the page gonna adjust to that size. Here is the bars icon. Whenever I click it, the menu appears and disappears. There is a lot of styling to make you more familiar with HTML and CSS. I also used font awesome icons. If you like any of the images, I'll be linking them in the description box along with the GitHub link for the project if you are interested. Let's get started. We're gonna jump into the HTML. The way I'm going to do this is in sections. I mean by that, I will put every part inside a section and focus on each section. I'm gonna save the JavaScript for last though. So let's start off here with just some boilerplate using image. I'm gonna do exclamation mark and hit enter. Now I want to link our style sheet and font awesome link, which you can find it on CDNGS. So you can just visit cdngs.com and just in the search box font awesome, choose the first one, and here you go, grab the link from here and paste it here. Now we're gonna add our style sheet, which we said earlier it exists in our assets folder. Oh, excuse me. Styles, yeah, here you go, beautiful. For the title, I'm gonna type this, MetaQ, and that should do it for the head area. So I'm gonna open this up, and you can open it using your file system or using Live Server. For those of you who VS Code but doesn't know about Live Server, you can click on the extensions icon, search for Live Server, and install it. After installing it, you can just right click on here and click on Open with Live Server. Let's close this up and we are getting a blank page. I'm gonna keep this page open just for reference though. We are going to work on the header and hero area. Basically, we're gonna have the navigation which represents this part here and also the section right below the header area. So in the navigation we have the logo and the menu elements and the content inside our hero section. So let's start with the HTML. Inside of our body, what I'm gonna use is a header tag. And inside it, we're gonna have a nav tag. I'll give it two classes, a nav class and a container class. And inside the nav, we are gonna have an anchor tag for the logo with the class of logo. It's not going to return anything. Let's type our logo here. You can use an image instead, because I decided to use just an anchor tag. And just below it, we're gonna use an unordered list with the class of menu. And inside it, we're gonna use the placements where we're gonna add our home, service, and about, the search icon, and the contact button. So we're gonna add the class of menu item. Just inside, we're gonna add our anchor tag. It's not going to return anything, and type home. Let's copy it multiple times. And here we're gonna change it to services. This one is gonna be about, This one is gonna be our icon. So fa dash solid dot fa dash magnifying dash glass. So this is our icon, and this one is gonna be a button, our contact button. It's gonna have two classes, button and button contact. The class of button contact is gonna be only used for the button contact, for the contact button. But this button is gonna be used for all the buttons. I decided to use only one class for the button because I don't want to repeat the same CSS code over and over. And we're gonna see that when we go to our style sheet. So that should do it for the header area. Let's save this file. And that's how our header area gonna look like without any CSS. Under our header, we're gonna add the hero section, which gonna have two classes, hero and container. Inside this section, as you can see in the finished version, we have two sides, a left side and a right side. On the left side, we have the badge, the title, the paragraph, and the buttons, and I'm gonna start with this side. So inside our section, I'll start with a div that has left side class and essentials. So basically the essentials class gonna have some CSS that we don't need to repeat over and over. That's gonna be used in multiple sections for this tutorial. So just inside it, we're gonna call a div for this badge, and inside it we're gonna call a span tag. Why are we going to use this span tag? Because we want only the first word to be colorful, just like in the title. And to achieve that, we're gonna use span, so not the whole sentence is going to be affected by the changement that we're gonna do. So the rest of it, here we go. And right below it, we're gonna have an H1, and inside it, it's gonna be metaverse and another span tag to achieve the same goal, NFT overflows. Under the H1, we're gonna have our paragraph, and we're gonna just add some dummy text. It's paragraph lorem 15. If I add lorem 15 and clicked enter, I'm gonna have 15 words. If it was 100, it's gonna be 100 words. If it was 10, it's gonna give you only 10 words. But now we're gonna use 15, and here you go. And under that, we're gonna have the login and sign up button. Each one of them is gonna have the button class, which we are going to style later on. So div with the class of buttons, and inside it we're gonna have an anchor tag with the class of button, and oh my god, what's wrong with me? Button sign up. It's not going to return anything. Here, let's type sign up. Let's copy it. Here we have a login and only the button tag, because it doesn't have any styling here, only a gray background, and that's what we are going to do with the button. Now we're gonna move on to the right side. Here we're gonna type just under the closing div for the left side, it's the left side, excuse me. Just below it, I'm gonna type div. I'm gonna give it the class of right side, and inside it I'm gonna add an image. The image is inside the assets folder, image, and it's gonna be hero.png. This is hero image, and let's save it. So let's just see what that gives us. As you can see, not much. We're gonna solve all of that stuff, don't worry about that. But that's it for the hero section as far as the HTML goes. We are going to turn this into this using CSS. Let's jump into style CSS. Before we do the hero section CSS, let's start with some base styling. Now, I'm gonna actually use custom properties. For those of you who don't know what custom properties are, they are basically some variables defined in CSS so we can use them later on throughout the file. I'm gonna paste the colors here. I have 4 colors. Just in case you want to change the primary color, you'll need only to change it right here. You don't have to check every class to change the color if you don't like it anymore. Now, I wanna add a reset for everything. Let's set box sizing to border box so the padding or borders won't affect the width or height of our page. I will also take off the margin and the padding. I'm gonna set the margin to 0 as well as the padding. That's our reset. For the body, I will use font family Roboto. I already added the link for Roboto by visiting Google Fonts and copying the link from there after searching for Roboto using the search input. If we take a look at our project, it should look like that. You can see that the margin and the padding are gone. We should not forget a line height of 1.5 to add some height between the lines. I want the overflow on the X spaces to be hidden. That's it for the body. For the unordered list, I will get rid of bullets. To do that, I'll use list style none. And for the links, we are gonna get rid of underlines using text decoration none. And I want it to have a lighter weight, so font weight 300. And for any images we have, they are gonna take up a max width of 100%. For this landing page, all the paragraphs will have the same color, which is the hard gray we declared in the root scope. The var function is used to insert the value of a CSS variable. If you don't like this color, you can just change it from here. I don't want the paragraph to be this bold. I want it to be lighter. So I'm gonna use font weight 300 once again. During this tutorial, I will use h5 tag. I want to adjust its size. I'll set it to 1.1 rem. In this video, I'm gonna be using rem units. If you are not familiar with rem units are based upon the font size of the root element. In our case, the root element is the HTML tag. Since we didn't give it a value, the rem is gonna use the browser's default font size, which is 16 pixels. So 1 rem equals 16 pixels, 2 rem equals 32 pixels, and so on. That's it for the basic styling. Let's jump into styling our navbar. Let's name this part navbar, because I want each part in CSS to be clear and easy to find. I'll use the nav class. It's gonna have display flex, position relative because I'll use some absolute positioning, justify content space between so our items can be evenly distributed. In our case, the items are the logo at the top left and the menu at the top right. We'll align all the elements in the center using align items center. Then the height, I'm gonna have this to be 60 pixels. Alright, let's deal with the logo. Let's call the nav class, then the logo class. Within the curly braces, we're gonna give it X large font size and a bold font weight. For the color, I'm gonna use primary color. The next thing I want to do is to solve the problem of this menu. As you can see, each one is on the top of the other one. To solve that, let's call the nav and the menu classes. As you can see here, the unordered list has a class called menu. To make them all next to each other, we'll use display flex and a transition of 3 seconds ease. We don't want our menu elements to be stacked up like that. So, nav, menu, menu item, and within the curly braces, we'll add 1 rem padding for both X and Y bases and a height of 100%. So the menu can take off all the height. That should do it for the menu. Next, for all the links inside the unordered list, I want them to have a hard gray color and a font size of 18 pixels and this transition because we'll add some hovering on the links. When we hover on home or about, I want them to be bolder and change to a black color with a line at the bottom like what we have here in the finished version. Let's call the nav class, the anchor tag, and hover. Write color and 3 zeros for the black color and set the font weight to bold. Beautiful. We are getting the effect we want. Let's move on to adding the blue border bottom when hovering on the menu elements. Let's write nav, menu, menu item, and hover. Within the curly braces, type border bottom 5 pixels width, solid style, and the primary color. Here you go. That's what we want to get when we hover on these. Now, I don't want the border bottom to show up at the bottom of the search icon and the contact button. If you want to leave it, you can. I only want the hovering to affect the first 3 elements. To achieve that, I will use nth child -n plus 3. And boom, the border bottom is no more affecting the last 2 elements. Now, I will explain -n plus 3. It means that the current styling applies only to the first 3 elements that has the class menu item. N is a counter that starts at 0, so if n equals 0, the third child gonna get affected by the styling because 0 plus 3 equals 3. And if n equals 1, then the second child will be affected because -1 plus 3 equals 2, and if n equals 2, that will give us 1. Again, the first child is the one that will be affected by the styling. To sum up, -n plus 3 represents the first 3 elements. And as you can see in the HTML file, our contact button has 2 classes. Let's style button first. Let's go to the top, because this class will be used by multiple buttons. Let's set the background color to light gray, add some padding, 0.7 rem top and bottom, 2 rems left and right. To make sure our text stays in the center, I'll use text align center. We want to remove any border. Now, border radius to add some roundedness of 25 pixels, and cursor should be pointer. Let's go back to the navbar section and style button contact. Alright, nav menu, button, button contact. Within the curly braces, it will have a white color, 3F, a lighter font weight, and for the background, I want to use linear gradient. In linear gradient, we must at least define 2 colors, and you can add the direction of the gradient if you want to. So, for the first color, I want to use the primary color, and for the second one, I'll use RGB 187, 187, and 240. Before jumping into the hero section, I want to add one more class. I'll be using container in different areas. I'll give it a max width of 1100 pixels. And we will set the margin to auto so that it gets put in the middle, to give us an even margin on the left and right. And then overflow set to hidden so nothing breaks out of its container. Then padding, I'm gonna put 0 for top and bottom and 2 rem for left and right. So that's the container. So if we take a look, let's make this become larger. You can see that this has been moved to the middle. Let's jump into the hero section and let's name it hero section. We will start with hero. We want these 2 divs to be the grid items. So we want to display grid on the hero class. Hero, display as grid. Then for the columns, we're gonna do grid template columns to get 2 even rows. So we'll use fractional units, 1 fraction and another 1 fraction. 1 fractional unit means that our div is gonna take 1 part of the available space. If the space is 100%, and here we have 1 fraction and another 1 fraction, then the available space is gonna be divided in half. 50% for the first fraction and 50% for the second one. And if we take a look now, you can see that we have two columns. To make this a little cleaner, you can just use repeat 2 times one fraction. I think that's all we need on the hero. As you can see in the HTML, we have an essentials class that we're gonna need to use multiple times. Let's go to the top and type essentials within the curly braces. Let's set display to flex, and all the content within the essentials are aligned horizontally. But I don't want them to be like that. I want them to be aligned vertically. The default is row, but we're gonna change it to column. We can do that by saying flex direction and set it to column. And now it's going vertically and not horizontally. I want to align them in the center of their container, so justify content center. And that's it for the essentials class. Now I'm gonna move on to styling this badge here. Let's go to the HTML file and give a class to this div. Light badge. Go back to the CSS file and type hero, left side, and light badge. I want the background color to have the lighter gray color. Set the font size to 0.7 rem, and I also want to add some padding. 0.4 rem top and bottom, 0.8 rem left and right. We want to give some margin between the badge and the title. So margin bottom and set it to 0.4 rem. For the text color, I want it to have a dark gray. Then border radius 20 pixels and letter spacing 1.5 pixels because I want some space between the letters. You can see that here the badge is going all the way to the right, but we don't want that. To make the width of our content fit the text inside it, we will add width fit content, which manages the width of an element. Now we need to give the word new a different color. So let's copy these classes and span. The color we will use is the primary color. That's it for the badge. Underneath the badge, we have h1 tag. We're gonna style it by making it bigger and give it some letter spacing to have some space between the letters. Font size 3 rem and letter spacing of 1.5 pixels. For the paragraph, let's copy again hero, left side, P, paragraph, and we will change the font size. Set it to 15 pixels and a margin bottom of 20 pixels because we want some space between the paragraph and the buttons. The last thing we need to style on the hero section is the sign up button. I will leave the login button to stay the same. So hero, buttons, sign up, set the background color to primary color, then the color to white. I want this button to move a little bit to the left. To do so, I'll type margin right 25 pixels. That should do it for the hero area. We're gonna jump back to the HTML, and just underneath the hero section, we will have a section with the class name features. Inside this section, we will have a div with two classes, container and features element. Then we will have another div with a class name of one single feature element and essentials. Within here, we're gonna have an h5 tag, and I'll type develop skills. Right below it, there is a paragraph with a dummy text. So lorem 11 to give us 11 word. I'll grab this div here and copy down twice. That's the features section. Let's take a look. It looks horrible right now. So jump into the CSS. So type features section. So in features itself, we will use background color dark gray and some padding so the text we have won't be stacked like that. 3 rem top and bottom, 0 left and right. For all the items inside features elements, I want them to be aligned evenly. So we're gonna display as grid in features elements. Then for the columns, we will do grid template columns to get 3 even rows like what we did on hero. We can use fractional units like so, one fraction, and one fraction, but it's better to use repeat 3 times one fraction. Within feature elements, I want all the texts inside each feature to be centered. Let's copy this. Text align center. I'll add some padding between these, so let's say padding 3 rem top and bottom, 0 left and right. It's fine to keep the paragraph like this, but I want the text to be more centered. So let's copy this again. Within the curly braces, padding 0 top and bottom, 40 pixels left and right. That's it for the features section. Let's move on to the about section. Jump back into the HTML, and below the features section, we'll have a section with about and container. Just like the hero, it will have 2 sides, one for the image and one for the content here, but in reverse. And within this section, we will have a div left side, and it's gonna have the image we've put in the assets folder. And underneath the closing tag, we'll call another div right side and essentials, which will have an h2 tag. And let's copy that from here. Then a paragraph with a dummy text, lorem 15 to give us 15 words. In the finished version, still have this word with an icon next to it. So div with a read class, then a link that will return nothing. Read more, we want to add an arrow icon. So I.fa-solid fa-right-long. Now let's go back to the CSS, name this part about. I changed it to about because it's easy to pronounce. It's not like just saying visualization. It's a long word, for me at least. Just like hero, we want both sides to be aligned evenly. Let's do that. Now if we go back, you can see that we have some spacing on top and bottom. I want H2 to look bigger. So about, right side, H2. I'd say font size equals to 2.5 rem. I also want to make some adjustments to the paragraph. I'll say font size 18 pixels, and I want some spacing between the paragraph and the link. So set margin bottom to 40 pixels. For this link here, I want the icon to go to the right a little bit. To achieve that, inside read, I'll say margin left 1 rem and a font size of 12 pixels. Jump back to the HTML file and let's grab the features section and put it underneath about section. Before we keep going, I need to correct a mistake I made. For the class name essentials, here in features section, you can see that we used it 3 times, but it's not written the same as essentials in CSS file, because I made a typo. Let's correct that first. Ctrl H, essentials, and there you go. You might be asking why the class worked even if it wasn't correct. Well, as you can see, we only have texts. And here in the CSS file, we used text align center. You can remove the class of essentials if you want, but if you removed it and you added an image or something, it won't move to the center without the essentials class. I know I made a typo here. I used A instead of E and E instead of A, but I kept using it, so let's finish our project. We will make some changements. This section class should be services. Within this, we will change features to services. On top of H5 tag, we will add our image. So image of rounded class, assets, image, and our image name. So this text gonna be constructive. Remove this, grab these, and copy them twice. Back to CSS. We'll name this section as Services section. I'll start with Services. Within the curly braces, background color 459FFF28, as well as the padding 3 rem top and bottom, 0 left and right. For all the items inside services elements, I want them to be aligned evenly and align all the items in service element to the center. Keep in mind, the first one is services elements in plural and the second is service element singular. Don't confuse them in CSS. The last thing we want to do in this section is to make the image round. I say rounded, I give them 150 pixels for width and 150 pixel height and a border radius of 50%. And that's it for this section. And here is the result we got. So back to HTML, underneath services, we will have a section with a class of newsletter. Within it, we will have a div of subscribe and essentials. Then an H3 tag that says subscribe for newsletter, followed by a paragraph lorem 11. Next, we have a div with a newsletter bar class, and inside it, we will have an input and a button. Its class is button subscribe. Move on to the CSS, so newsletter, and begin with calling the classes newsletter and subscribe. For this section, we want to add a background image, so URL and the path back to the image. I want the image size to cover all this up, so background size cover. And for the position, I'll set it to center. And also background repeat, I'll set it to no repeat, because by default, a background image is repeated both vertically and horizontally. I'll give it a height of 100 view height, and I want this to align in the center. Text align center. And that's what we want to have for this class. This title is too small. I want it to be larger. I say newsletter H3, font size 2.5 rem. It looks fine now, but I'll give it 1.5 pixels for letter spacing. And there you go. As you can see here, the paragraph and the input are too close to each other. I want to add some space between them. Margin bottom 35 pixels. Let's move on to styling the input. So newsletter bar input. I want the width of 60% of the page and a height of 38 pixels and a padding of 0.4 rem top and bottom, 1 rem left and right. I don't want it to have any borders, so border none. And finally, a light gray background. And great, that's what we want to have. I want both the button and input to have the same height of 38 pixels, a blue background. Let's set the text color to white and remove any borders, border none. Set padding to 0.4 rem top and bottom, 1 rem left and right. Now the text inside the button, I want it to be uppercase. To do so, I'll add text transform, set it to uppercase, and finally the cursor should be pointer, and that should do it for newsletter section. Let's jump into HTML and write the footer section. Use a footer tag, then add a div with footer elements and container classes. And within this div, we will have these 4 parts here. Div of footer element class, then add an H5 tag, information, followed by an unordered list. So type li, then a link. It will not return anything about us. Let's grab this line and copy it 3 times. FAQ, terms and conditions, privacy policy. And you can grab this from the HTML starting from the footer element class and copy it 3 times. I'm gonna copy all of them at once because I don't want to write all the text here and change it. And that's it for the HTML. Back again to the CSS. Before we do this, I want you to style it yourself. Pause the video and try it out. If you pause the video and try it, don't worry if we don't have the same outcome. Each developer has its own way to express HTML and CSS. Let's start with footer tag. I say background color, var, primary color. I want the text inside footer to be white. Don't forget to add a padding of 3 rem, top and bottom, 0, left and right. Next, for footer elements, we'll have display grid and grid template columns repeat 4 times 1 fraction. So each part here is gonna have 25% of the available space. I want all the text inside this class to be aligned in the center. So text align center. For H5 tag, it will have a black color and a font weight of 500. Last but not least, I'll say the links inside footer element gonna be white, 1 rem of font size. Alright, so we are pretty much all set as far as the CSS aside from the responsiveness. There are a few things we need to take care of. I'll click on Inspect and see what I'm talking about. When I get to 900, it still looks fine, but when I get to 850 pixels and less, it starts to look weird, especially the title. It looks too big for this screen size. We're gonna add a couple of media queries, and we're gonna have a media query for 850 pixels or less. So let's add media parentheses, and we'll say for max width 850 pixels. Within the curly braces, first thing I'm gonna do is to change the size of H1 tag in hero section. So hero left side H1, the size of H1 will be 2.5 rem. Normally it was 3 rem. I'll also set letter spacing to 1.3 pixels. And that's how we want the title to become. Smaller when we reach 850 pixels. I want to change another thing in the About section. This title. It is also quite big. Let's make the size smaller. So I'll say About, right side, H2, set the font size to 2 rem. Originally it was 2.5 rem. I also want this paragraph to have a smaller size. So About, right side, paragraph, font size will become 1 rem or 16 pixels. Now it looks fine. It still looks fine for everything else. Let's make this page smaller. When we get to 750 pixels, the page again starts to look weird. We'll have to change grid for all the items we have in features section as well as services. I want the items there to stack one on top of the other. Basically, we want all the text to be smaller. Let's do that. Let's create another media query for 750 pixels. So media max width of 750 pixels or less. Let's grab this from here, copy it down here, and change this to 2.2 rem and set letter spacing to 1.2 pixels. In the features section, I want each one to take off all the page, all the space available here. So we have features features elements, I'll set grid template columns to 1 fraction because it's the only thing that we need to change here. For the about section, I want this text to become smaller. So about, right side, H2, I'll say font size is 1.7 rem for H2, and for the paragraph, we'll just give it 14 pixels. Paragraph, font size 14 pixels. Let's go down and look at what we need to change. There you go. We need to change the grid template columns for this section too, and also the size of this H3 tag for newsletter section. Let's go back to our CSS. I'll say services elements, grid template columns, 1 fraction. So each part is gonna take 100% of the available space. We will add some padding for service elements. So padding is gonna be 1.5 rem top and bottom, 0 left and right. Then newsletter H2 font size is gonna be 2 rem. Alright? So around here, the menu starts to look weird. The content within the hero section doesn't look right as well. Let's change that. Let's create one more media query, and it's gonna be the last one for 650. I'll minimize the padding of the container. Normally it was 2 rem for left and right. I'll change it to only 1 rem. Next, I'll go back to the HTML file and add one more line underneath the logo link. So span of the class bars, I of the class fa-solid, fa-bars. In the CSS file, exactly in the nav section, we will style the new icon. So nav, bars, color is gonna be primary color, and we will set 20 pixels for the font size. For the cursor, we will choose pointer. And here, in the finished version, you can see that when I scroll down, this bar is following me, and it has a white circle in the background. To make the bar stay fixed, regardless of scrolling, we will use position fixed. And this should go to the right. So right of 16 pixels, a white background color, width and height of 50 pixels, then 50% of border radius, so it becomes a circle. However, we don't want the bar to show up in screens larger than 650 pixels, so we're gonna add display none, and that's it. And yes, that is not in the center, but we're gonna fix that later. Now we're gonna have to style the unordered list. I want this to stay fixed, so it stays in the same position regardless of scrolling, and disappear when the width is 650 pixels. I also want the elements to be on top of each other. Let's go back to CSS. I say nav menu, set position to fixed, top to 0, and left to 0. To make them on top of each other, we will change their direction to column. So flex direction, column. As you can see, the unordered list is still here, but has a transparent background. Let's give it a white background. It's fine now, but we need to change the width. So width is gonna be 100%. To make it disappear, we technically won't make it disappear, but we will make it change its placement vertically. To achieve that, we're gonna use transform, translate on y-axis, then minus 200%. If we only do minus 50%, you can see that the half of the menu still shows up. I used minus 200% to make sure it won't show up on any device. And finally, the index 1000 to always stays on top of all the elements. Now we want the bars we added earlier to be displayed. Let's add nav bars, then display is gonna be flex. To make this bar go to the center, we'll do justify content center and I'll say align items center. And there you go. So here is the result. There is another one thing I need to add is the index of 1000. Here I want whenever the user clicks on the bars, I want the menu to show up again. To do so, I'm gonna add a class that will take care of that. So nav, menu, active, then transform, translate y back to 0. I'll add this class in the HTML exactly next to the menu, and there you go. You can see that the menu showed up. Let's remove the class because we are not supposed to add it manually. That's what JavaScript gonna do. So let's continue and finish our styling first before we go to JavaScript. In the hero section, I want the image to go away and keep only the text in the middle of its container. I'll start with hero. Let's say padding 30 pixels top and bottom, 0 left and right. Grid template columns back to only one fraction. Then hero, right side, display none. And here is the result. Now we're gonna move those to the center, the texts as well as the buttons. So hero, left side, I'll add text align center, justify content center, and finally align items center. For the H1 tag, I wanted to have a smaller size. So hero, left side, H1, font size is gonna be 1.6 rem. And for the paragraph, I don't want it to go all the way here to the sides. So hero, left side, paragraph, I'll give it 300 pixels of width. So it will only take 300 pixels of the screen size. And that's it for this section. Down here in about section, I'll do the same thing I did to hero. So back to CSS, about, set the grid template columns to one fraction. Then a padding of 4 rem top and bottom, 0 left and right. Then a line height of 2 because I want some height between the lines. Then we will set display none to the left side of about. We don't want the image to still be here. Don't forget to align everything to the center. So about, right side, text align center. And align items center. For the paragraph, I wanted to have a limited width. So about, right side, paragraph, and then 300 pixels width. And you can see that on newsletter, we need to change the size of the title. I'll say newsletter H3 font size 1.5 rem. The last thing we're gonna add for media query is the footer. So in footer elements, we're gonna have a grid template, columns repeat 2 times one fraction. And there you go. That's it for the HTML and CSS, and that is the result. Let's move on to the main.js file. We're gonna start with declaring our items. First is gonna be the bars icon. So const bars equals to document.querySelector, the name of our class. So we are calling the bars that exist in the HTML. Next, we will declare the unordered list that has a class of menu. So const menu equals document query selector of the class menu. Whenever the user clicks on the bars icon, I want the active class to be added and removed whenever a user clicks it. So we'll use add event listener to achieve that. We're gonna use a click event. The function that is going to run after clicking on it is menu class list toggle to toggle the active class by adding it if it is removed or remove it if it is already there. Inside the parentheses we're gonna type active, and there you go. I think I forgot to add the script file, so let's go and check on that. Back to HTML file, go back down right before the closing tag of the body and add the script file, assets and main.js, and now it's gonna work properly, and there you go. That's it for our landing page. I hope you learned something from this video. If you did, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Thank you. Bye bye.